Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something that might shock you. Strategy will not scale your business. You can have the perfect business plan, the slickest marketing funnel, the most advanced systems, and still stay stuck exactly where you are. Why? Because strategy is never the real chokehold. The real chokehold is you, your energy, your psychology, your hunger, your willingness to lead when it's uncomfortable. Businesses don't grow, people do. And until you grow, no strategy in the world will take you to the next level. And here's a 1,000-word motivational speech written in the style you requested. And when it comes to building a business, most people believe that if they just get the right strategy, the perfect marketing funnel, or the ultimate plan, everything will fall into place. They believe that if they map out the right steps, success will follow like a guarantee. But let me tell you something that most people never hear. Strategy alone will never scale your business. You can have the most brilliant plan written on the most beautiful whiteboard, and it won't take you an inch forward if you don't have the energy, the psychology, and the relentless drive to make it come alive. Strategy is a map, but if you don't have the fire to move, that map is just ink on paper. And think about it. How many businesses out there have the same access to strategies as you? The same books, the same seminars, the same YouTube videos, the same online courses. Information has never been more accessible. If strategy alone was the answer, everyone who read the same book or attended the same workshop would have the same results. But they don't. Some explode with growth, others stay stuck in the same cycle, and many fade away. Why? Because strategy is the least scarce resource in business today. The rarest thing is the psychology of execution, the courage to take massive MPI, perfect action, and the energy to push through when everything is screaming at you to quit. And scaling a business is not just about systems and tactics. It's about the people running it, and most importantly, the leader at the center of it, you. Because let's be real. If your psychology is weak, your strategy won't matter. If your energy is low, your strategy won't matter. If you're paralyzed by fear, uncertainty, or doubt, you'll never execute even the most brilliant plan. The truth is, companies don't grow, people do. When you expand yourself, when you unlock more of your capacity, when you break through the limitations in your own mind, suddenly scaling your business becomes inevitable. And there's a pattern I've seen again and again. Entrepreneurs obsess over the how. How do I market better? How do I automate this? How do I structure my team? And those are good questions, but they're not the first questions. The real question is, who do I need to become in order to make this business scale? Who do I need to be as a leader, as a visionary, as a force of nature that inspires others to follow, to commit, to give their very best? Because if you don't elevate your identity, if you don't expand your sense of what's possible, every strategy will feel like pushing a boulder uphill. And let me give you an example. Imagine two business owners who both have the same strategy laid out in front of them. One has absolute certainty that no matter what happens, they'll find a way to win. They radiate energy. They inspire their team. They lead with clarity and boldness. The other is full of doubt. They second-guess every decision. They lack confidence. They're constantly distracted and overwhelmed. Who do you think is going to scale faster? It's not even a question. The same strategy in different hands produces radically different results because the psychology behind it is what fuels execution. And you've got to realize that scaling is about building momentum. Momentum doesn't come from sitting in front of a computer staring at a spreadsheet. Momentum comes from action. It comes from making bold moves. It comes from leveraging the power of energy and influence. The strategies you use are multipliers, but the real force behind growth is the intensity you bring. If you're tired, if you're burned out, if you're going through the motions, your business reflects that. But when you're alive, when you're on fire, when you're obsessed with serving at a higher level, that energy infects your team, your clients, and the marketplace. People are drawn to it. They want to be a part of it. And don't misunderstand me. Strategy matters. Systems matter. Processes matter. But they are not the foundation. They are the scaffolding. The foundation is your psychology, your standards, your vision, your hunger. Because strategy without hunger is wasted. You can't outsource hunger. You can't automate vision. You can't delegate belief. That has to come from you. And when it does, strategy becomes the vehicle, not the driver. And look back at history. The greatest businesses weren't built because someone had a slightly better business plan than their competitors. They were built because someone had a bigger vision, an unstoppable drive, and the courage to do what others were unwilling to do. They used strategy, but they were fueled by something far greater. That's why so many businesses with smart strategies still fail, because they lack the energy, the culture, and the relentless obsession to execute. And scaling requires leadership, and leadership is not a strategy, it's a state of being. Leadership is about the ability to communicate vision so powerfully that others feel it in their bones. It's about the courage to make tough decisions and the resilience to keep moving when you get punched in the gut by reality. It's about inspiring your team to play at a level they didn't even know they were capable of. No spreadsheet can do that for you. No strategy deck can ignite that kind of fire. That comes from within you. And here's the truth. The chokehold on the growth of any business is always the psychology of its leader. Always. Not the market, not the competitors, not the economy. Those are factors, yes, but the real chokehold is internal. Because the moment you expand your mindset, the moment you raise your standards, the moment you commit to being unstoppable, you find a way around every obstacle. You find a way to adapt, to innovate, to pivot, to break through. Strategy becomes a tool, not a crutch. And so if you want to scale your business, stop obsessing over getting the perfect plan. Obsess over your energy. Obsess over your psychology. Obsess over creating a vision so compelling that you wake up every day with fire in your belly to make it real. Then, with that state of mind, pick a strategy and run with it. Because even if it's not perfect, massive action with energy will outperform perfect plans without execution every single time. And the marketplace rewards those who move, those who innovate, those who stay in motion. It punishes hesitation, fear, and waiting for the right time. There will never be a perfect moment. There will never be a flawless strategy. The power comes from you deciding, committing, and acting with intensity. And as you do, you learn, you adapt, you adjust. That's how real scaling happens. And so remember this, strategy is important, but it is not the holy grail. You are the driver, the source, the force that gives that strategy life. Until you bring your full energy, your full vision, and your full commitment to the table, strategy will just sit there. But when you do, strategy becomes rocket fuel. That's when your business scales, not because of the plan on paper, but because of the unstoppable force of the person who's willing to make it real. And got it. Here's the direct continuation of the speech, expanded by another 1,000 words with the same tone and style, picking up exactly where the first part ended. And because scaling a business isn't just about knowing what to do, it's about conditioning yourself to follow through, to persist when others would fold, and to keep finding new levels of possibility inside yourself. Every obstacle you face in business is not there to stop you. It's there to test you. It's there to strengthen you. It's there to force you to grow into the kind of leader who can handle the business you're dreaming of. And let's be clear, your business will never outgrow you. If you're stuck, if you're limited, if you're playing small, then your business will reflect that. But the moment you expand, the moment you raise your standards, the moment you decide to stop tolerating mediocrity from yourself, your team, and your results, that's the moment your business begins to truly scale. And you've got to ask yourself, what's really holding you back? It's not the lack of strategy. You already know enough strategies to build 10 businesses. It's the voice in your head that says you're not ready. It's the fear of making the wrong move. It's the comfort zone that keeps you playing at the level you're at, even though deep down you know you're capable of so much more. Scaling is about breaking that pattern. It's about saying, I will no longer let fear dictate the size of my vision, because fear is always there. The difference between those who scale massively and those who stay stuck is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to act in spite of it. And think about the greatest entrepreneurs, the most iconic leaders, the innovators who transformed industries. Were they fearless? Absolutely not. They were scared. They had doubts. They faced setbacks that would have destroyed most people, but they conditioned themselves to keep moving, to keep acting, to keep innovating, even when they didn't have certainty. They understood that progress comes from momentum, not perfection. That's why they scaled while others waited for the perfect moment that never arrived. And this is where energy comes into play. Your energy is everything. Scaling a business demands an intensity that most people simply aren't willing to bring. It requires you to be relentless, to be resourceful, to tap into levels of creativity you didn't even know existed. And you can't do that if you're drained, if you're running on fumes, if you're burnt out. You've got to protect your energy like your life depends on it, because in business it does. Your energy is the currency that fuels your team, your clients, your vision. If you walk into a room exhausted, uninspired, and distracted, your team feels it. They mirror it. But if you walk in charged, focused, and unstoppable, they rise to match your level. That's how cultures are built. That's how movements are created. And scaling also requires obsession, not casual interest, not dabbling, obsession. You've got to be consumed with the vision you're building, so much so that it becomes part of your identity. Because when you're obsessed, you don't stop when it gets hard. You don't quit when the numbers dip, or when the market shifts. You adapt, you find a way, you do whatever it takes. That kind of hunger cannot be faked. It cannot be taught in a classroom. It comes from deciding that failure is not an option, that this business will scale because you will scale. And when you're obsessed, you attract others who want to be part of that mission. People don't follow strategies. They follow energy. They follow conviction. They follow leaders who make them believe in something bigger than themselves. If you want to scale, you got to stop trying to do it all alone. You've got to build a team, not just of employees, but of believers. People who are aligned with your vision, people who feel that same fire, people who will go above and beyond because they're part of something that matters. Strategy won't build that team. Leadership will. Passion will. The way you show up every single day will. And you've also got to condition yourself to embrace uncertainty because scaling a business means walking into unknown territory. It means stepping into spaces you've never been before, making decisions you've never made, and navigating challenges you couldn't have predicted. If you need everything to be safe and certain, you'll never scale. Growth is on the other side of uncertainty. Expansion lives in that space where you're uncomfortable, where you're stretched, where you're not sure if you can handle it, and then you rise up and prove that you can. That's how you discover new levels of power inside yourself. And understand this, the market is always changing. Strategies that worked yesterday may be obsolete tomorrow. If you're attached to a single strategy, you'll die with it. The leaders who scale are the ones who are flexible, adaptable, constantly learning, constantly evolving. They don't marry strategies, they marry their vision. They use strategy as a tool, but they never confuse the tool with the mission. They're not attached to being right, they're committed to results. That's why they keep finding ways to win, even when the game changes. And if you want to scale, you've got to stop treating business like a hobby. You've got to raise your standards. Stop tolerating excuses from yourself. Stop settling for good enough. Stop being satisfied with survival. Demand more from yourself. Demand more from your team. Demand more from the way you serve your clients. Because businesses don't scale by accident. They scale when leaders set higher standards and refuse to back down until those standards are met. And ask yourself right now, what are the standards you've been tolerating in your business? Where have you been settling? Where have you been telling yourself that someday you'll step up? Scaling requires that you rip away those illusions and step into full ownership. There is no someday. There is only now. The actions you take today, the energy you bring today, the decisions you make today, that's what shapes the future of your business. And don't underestimate the power of focus. One of the biggest reasons businesses fail to scale is because the leaders spread themselves too thin. They chase shiny objects. They try to do everything. But scaling doesn't come from doing everything. It comes from doing the right things with massive intensity. It comes from clarity, from knowing exactly what drives results and pouring your energy into those areas relentlessly. Strategy can point you in the right direction, but focus is what makes it real. And another piece of scaling that strategy alone can never give you is resilience. You will face setbacks. You will have launches that flop. You will lose clients. You will make mistakes that cost you time and money. That's guaranteed. The question is, will you let those moments define you, or will you use them to refine you? The leaders who scale aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who bounce back faster. They don't waste time wallowing. They extract the lesson, adjust the strategy, and get back in the game stronger than before. And resilience comes from meaning. If your business is just about money, you'll fold when it gets hard. But if it's about something deeper, about serving, about creating, about making an impact, then you'll have a reason to push through the pain. You'll have a reason to get back up when you've been knocked down. That deeper purpose is what gives you staying power. Strategy can't give you that. Only you can. And let's talk about courage. Scaling demands it. Courage to take risks, courage to make bold moves, courage to put yourself out there when you don't know if it's going to work. Most people wait for courage to show up before they act. That's why they stay stuck. Courage doesn't come first. Action does. You act, you face the fear, you do it anyway, and that's when courage shows up. That's how you build it. And the more you build it, the more unstoppable you become. And scaling is not about never feeling fear. It's about conditioning yourself to act in spite of it, to trust yourself, to trust that you'll figure it out, to trust that no matter what happens, you will find a way to turn it into fuel. That trust in yourself is what allows you to move faster, to take bigger leaps, to seize opportunities that others are too afraid to touch. And so remember, the real key to scaling is not hidden in a secret strategy. It's in you. It's in the way you think, the way you lead, the way you show up. It's in your hunger, your vision, your energy, your courage. Strategy is the amplifier. but you are the source. And understood, here's the continuation, another 1,000 words added, beginning exactly where the second part ended and keeping the same motivational driving style. And if you want proof that it's not strategy that scales a business, but the state of the leader, just look at the times you've already succeeded. Think back to the moments when you didn't have all the answers, when you didn't have a clear roadmap, when you were making it up as you went along, but you still moved, you still pushed forward, and somehow you created results. It wasn't because you had the perfect formula. It was because you were in a state of certainty, of resourcefulness, of absolute determination to make it happen. That state was the real strategy. That energy was what turned the unknown into progress. And if you can do it once, you can condition yourself to do it over and over again until scaling becomes inevitable. And because here's the truth, it's not about resources, it's about resourcefulness. Too many people convince themselves that they can't scale because they don't have the money, they don't have the right team, they don't have the connections, they don't have the latest tech. That's a lie. What you lack in resources, you can make up for in creativity, in persistence, in sheer refusal to give up. The greatest companies in the world were born in garages, basements, dorm rooms, not because the founders had every resource, but because they had the resourcefulness to leverage whatever they did have and turn it into momentum. Resourcefulness is the ultimate strategy. And resourcefulness is born from hunger. When you're hungry, you'll find a way. When you're hungry, you'll work until the job gets done. When you're hungry, you'll attract people who feel that same energy, that same urgency, that same drive. Hunger is magnetic. The people who are obsessed, who are driven, who radiate passion and purpose, those are the people everyone else wants to follow. And that hunger can't be faked. Either you're lit up by your vision or you're not. If you're not, you'll burn out. But if you are, you'll keep moving no matter what. And scaling also requires a willingness to raise your emotional thermostat. Think about it. Every one of us has a thermostat for what we believe we deserve. How much success, how much income, how much impact, how much influence. If you exceed that level, you'll unconsciously sabotage yourself until you come back down to where you're comfortable. And if you dip below it, you'll fight like hell to get back up. The real secret to scaling is raising that thermostat permanently so that your comfort zone is no longer playing small but operating at a level of excellence. Weep workers. And you change what you believe you deserve. You change what you're willing to tolerate, and suddenly scaling becomes the natural byproduct of your new standards. And this is where identity comes in. Your identity is the invisible force that controls every decision you make, every action you take, every result you create. If you see yourself as a scrappy entrepreneur just trying to get by, you'll never scale into the leader of a thriving organization. But if you shift your identity, if you begin to see yourself as the architect of a movement, as the leader of a company that will change lives, as someone who builds and scales because it's who you are, then everything changes. You don't have to force yourself to act at that level. You act at that level because it's consistent with who you believe you are. And identity is not fixed. It's chosen. You decide who you are, and the moment you decide differently, you begin to operate differently. And now let's talk about influence. Scaling a business is not just about you. It's about your ability to influence others, your team, your clients, your market. The better you get at influencing, the faster you'll scale. Influence is not manipulation. Influence is the ability to understand people, to connect with them, to communicate in a way that moves them emotionally and compels them to act. It's the ability to paint a vision so vivid that they feel it in their bones, to make them see themselves in that vision, to inspire them to commit. Strategy doesn't create influence. Influence comes from certainty, from energy, from authenticity, from the depth of your belief. And scaling requires mastery of influence because you cannot do it all yourself. At some point, if you want to multiply, you've got to get other people to own the vision with you. You've got to build leaders around you. You've got to empower them, not just to execute tasks, but to carry the torch, to become ambassadors of your vision. When you create leaders, instead of just managing employees, that's when your business begins to scale without you having to touch every part of it. That's leverage, that's growth, that's freedom. But let's be honest, most people don't scale because they're addicted to control. They want to do everything themselves. They don't trust others. They micromanage. They fear letting go, and that fear becomes the ceiling of their business. If you want to scale, you've got to release control. You've got to build systems that empower people, not systems that strangle them. You've got to stop asking, how can I do this, and start asking, who can do this? Because the moment you shift from doing to leading, from controlling to empowering, from being the bottleneck to being the catalyst, that's when your business can finally grow beyond the limits of your own two hands. And scaling also demands that you become obsessed with growth, not just the growth of your business, but your own personal growth. Your company will never outpace your personal development. If you stop growing, your business stops growing. That means reading, learning, seeking mentors, investing in coaching, surrounding yourself with people who challenge you to think bigger, who won't let you settle for less than you're capable of. It means being humble enough to know that you don't know it all, but hungry enough to keep learning every single day. Because the moment you think you've arrived, you begin to decline. And let's not ignore the role of vision. Scaling is not about adding more revenue or more clients. It's about creating a vision so compelling that it pulls you forward, that it energizes you in the face of obstacles, that it inspires everyone around you to give their best. Vision is the fuel. Without it, scaling feels like a grind. With it, scaling feels inevitable. People don't get behind numbers. They don't get behind spreadsheets. They get behind missions. They get behind movements. They get behind visions that make them feel alive. If your vision doesn't scare you, it's too small. If your vision doesn't excite you, it's not going to excite anyone else. And don't forget discipline. Scaling is not built on grand gestures. It's built on consistent action. The little things you do daily compound into massive results over time. Discipline is doing what needs to be done even when you don't feel like it. Discipline is executing the boring fundamentals while everyone else is chasing shiny objects. Discipline is what keeps you on track when distractions come knocking, when setbacks hit, when the excitement fades. Discipline is what makes scaling sustainable, because energy gets you started, but discipline keeps you moving when the energy dips. And then there's courage to innovate. Scaling requires you to play offense, not just defense. If you're always reacting to the market, you'll never lead it. You've got to be willing to disrupt yourself before someone else does. You've got to constantly ask, what's next? How can we do this better? How can we deliver more value? You can't cling to what worked yesterday, because yesterday's solutions are tomorrow's problems. Innovation doesn't come from comfort. It comes from challenging assumptions, breaking patterns, and daring to do what others think is impossible. And finally, scaling requires faith. Faith in yourself, faith in your vision, faith in the process. Because there will be moments when nothing seems to be working, when you're pouring your heart and soul into the business and the results aren't showing up yet. In those moments, the only thing that keeps you going is faith, the belief that if you keep moving, if you keep adapting, if you keep showing up with relentless energy, the breakthrough will come. And it always does. The people who scale are the ones who keep the faith long enough to see it through. And absolutely, here's the continuation, adding another 1,000 words beginning exactly where the third part ended, with the same motivational drive and intensity. And in the moment you realize that faith isn't some blind hope, but a muscle you build, everything changes. Faith grows every time you step forward into uncertainty and discover that you survived, that you figured it out, that you were stronger than you thought. Every leap you take reinforces the belief that you can take the next one. Every setback you overcome reinforces the certainty that you are unstoppable. And that momentum compounds. What starts as small acts of courage snowballs into an unshakable confidence, and that confidence becomes the foundation that allows you to scale again and again. And scaling is never a straight line. It's messy, it's unpredictable, it's filled with moments where you'll feel like you're on top of the world one day and in the pit the next. But if you're committed, if you refuse to quit, if you keep reminding yourself why you started, those ups and downs stop controlling you. You learn to ride them. You learn to turn frustration into fuel. You learn that every challenge is a signal, not to stop, but to sharpen. And the leaders who master that mindset, who condition themselves to see obstacles as opportunities, are the ones who build companies that endure. And the reason most businesses plateau is not because the strategy stops working. It's because the leader stops growing. They lose the hunger. They get comfortable. They stop pushing themselves into uncomfortable spaces. Comfort is the enemy of scaling, because the moment you get comfortable, you stop innovating. You stop adapting. You stop demanding more from yourself and your team. Scaling requires that you live in a state of constant expansion, that you're always stretching, always asking, what's next? How can we go further? How can we deliver more? The moment you stop asking those questions, the game is already over. And this is where passion comes into play. Passion is the force that keeps you alive when the grind feels endless, when the numbers aren't adding up, when the pressure feels unbearable. Passion is the reminder that this business isn't just about profits. It's about people. It's about purpose. It's about creating something that matters. When you're connected to that passion, scaling is not a burden. It's a privilege. It becomes an extension of who you are. But passion without discipline is wasted energy, and discipline without passion is drudgery. The magic happens when passion and discipline collide, when your heart and your habits are aligned. That's when scaling feels less like a struggle and more like an unstoppable force pulling you forward. And another thing you've got to master is resilience in relationships. Scaling is not a solo journey. It's about partnerships, collaborations, alliances, and a team that grows with you. And relationships will test you. People will disappoint you. Some will leave. Some will betray you. Some will not match the vision you've set. And if you let those moments harden you, if you let them make you cynical, you'll close yourself off from the very relationships that could take you to the next level. You've got to stay open. You've got to stay willing to trust. You've got to keep investing in people even when it hurts, because scaling a business is ultimately about scaling people. If you want 10 times the results, you've got to build 10 times the trust, 10 times the culture, 10 times the connection. And scaling is also about alignment. When your vision, your values, and your actions are aligned, you create a force that cannot be stopped. But when you say one thing and do another, when you preach values that you don't live, when you talk about vision but act in fear, the cracks show up in your culture, and those cracks spread like wildfire. People don't just listen to what you say, they watch how you live. They follow your example. If you're aligned, they're aligned. If you're consistent, they're consistent. If you redisciplined, they're disciplined. That alignment becomes the backbone of scaling. And let's not ignore the role of speed. In business, speed matters. Most people move too slow because they're waiting for certainty, waiting for permission, waiting for the stars to align. But the leaders who scale are the ones who move fast, who test quickly, who learn faster than their competitors. They don't wait to have everything figured out. They act, they gather feedback, they adjust. Every day wasted in hesitation is a day your competition pulls ahead. Speed creates momentum, and momentum compounds. The faster you move, the more results you create, the more confidence you build, and the more you can reinvest into scaling again. And scaling also requires that you become a master of focus on impact, not just income. Income follows impact. If you obsess over serving, over creating value at a level no one else is willing to, the money comes as a natural byproduct. But if you chase money without impact, you'll always feel empty. And your clients will feel it too. People can sense when you're in it for the transaction versus when you're in it for transformation. Transformation scales. Transactions don't. If you want to build something that lasts, something that grows, something that multiplies beyond you, then focus on impact first. Serve more, give more, innovate more, and the marketplace will reward you beyond what you ever imagined. And scaling demands vision beyond yourself. If the only reason you're scaling is to make your life easier, to build your bank account, to satisfy your own needs, then your business will hit a ceiling. But if your vision includes elevating others, creating opportunities, contributing to something larger than yourself, then your business has no ceiling. Because people will rally behind a cause, not just a company. They'll sacrifice, they'll contribute, they'll stay loyal because they're part of something meaningful. That sense of contribution multiplies energy, and energy is the real multiplier of scaling. And one of the greatest truths about scaling is that it requires mastery of state. Every day you wake up in a certain emotional state, and that state determines the quality of your decisions, the intensity of your actions, the results you produce. If you wake up stressed, overwhelmed, fearful, you will make cautious, defensive decisions that stunt growth. But if you wake up in a state of certainty, gratitude, hunger, and focus, you'll make bold decisions, you'll take decisive action, and you'll create momentum that compounds. State is everything. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if you're in a lousy state, you'll sabotage it. On the other hand, you can have an imperfect strategy, but if you're in a powerful state, you'll find a way to make it work. And so condition your state daily. Don't leave it to chance. Don't let circumstances dictate how you feel. Decide who you want to be, decide how you want to show up, and create rituals that put you in that state every single morning. Movement, focus, gratitude, visualization, whatever it takes to prime yourself into the version of you that scales. Because scaling doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you show up as the person who can handle it over and over again. And when it comes to scaling, never underestimate the power of hunger that is tied to contribution. When your mission is not just about you, but about how many lives you can touch, how much value you can create, how many people you can elevate, the hunger never dies. You'll find energy you didn't know you had. You'll find resilience you didn't know was possible. You'll keep going when everyone else stops, because you're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for something bigger. And that's what creates unstoppable momentum. And remember, scaling is not just a business game. It's a human game. It's about psychology, energy, Anger, leadership, vision, resilience, and contribution. Strategy will amplify those things, but it will never replace them. The moment you embody these qualities, the moment you raise your standards, the moment you decide to become the kind of leader who doesn't just chase growth but embodies it, your business will have no choice but to scale